Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My friends, last Thursday I described in detail certain economic problems which everyone admits now face the nation. For the many messages which have come to me after that speech, and which it is physically impossible to answer individually, I take this means of saying thank you. Tonight, sitting at my desk in the White House, I make my first radio report to the people in my second term of office. I'm reminded of that evening in March 4 years ago when I made my first radio report to you. We were then in the midst of the great banking crisis. Soon after, with the authority of the Congress, we asked the nation to turn over all of its privately held gold, dollar for dollar, to the government of the United States. Today's recovery proves how right that policy was. But when almost 2 years later, it came before the Supreme Court, its constitutionality was upheld only by a 5-4 vote. The change of one vote would have thrown all the affairs of this great nation back into hopeless chaos. In effect, 4 justices ruled that the right under a private contract to exact a pound of flesh was more sacred than the main objectives of the Constitution to establish an enduring nation. In 1933, you and I knew that we must never let our economic system get completely out of joint again, that we could not afford to take the risk of another Great Depression. We also became convinced that the only way to avoid a repetition of those dark days was to have a government with power to prevent and to cure the abuses and the inequalities which had thrown that system out of joint. We then began a program of remedying those abuses and inequalities to give balance and stability to our economic system, to make it bomb-proof against the causes of 1929. Today, we are only part way through that program, and recovery is speeding up to a point where the dangers of 1929 are again becoming possible. Not this week or month, perhaps, but within a year or two. National laws are needed to complete that program. Individual or local or state effort alone cannot protect us in 1937 any better than 10 years ago. It will take time, and plenty of time, to work out our remedies administratively, even after legislation is passed. To complete our program of protection in time, therefore, we cannot delay one moment in making certain that our national government has power to carry through. 4 years ago, action did not come until the 11th hour. It was almost too late. If we learned anything from the Depression, we will not allow ourselves to run around in new circles of futile discussion and debate, always postponing the day of decision. The American people have learned from the Depression, for in the last 3 national elections, an overwhelming majority of them voted a mandate that the Congress and the President begin the task of providing that protection, not after long years of debate, but now. The courts, however, have cast doubts on the ability of the elected Congress to protect us against catastrophe by meeting squarely our modern social and economic conditions. We are at a crisis in our ability to proceed with that protection. It is a quiet crisis. There are no lines of depositors outside closed banks, but to the far-sighted, it is far-reaching in its possibilities of injury to America. I want to talk with you very simply tonight about the need for present action in this crisis, the need to meet the unanswered challenge of 1/3 of a nation ill-nourished, ill-clad, ill-housed. Last Thursday, I described the American form of government as a three-horse team provided by the Constitution to the American people so that their field might be plowed. The three horses are, of course, the three branches of government: the Congress, the executive, and the courts. Two of the horses, the Congress and the executive, are pulling in unison today. The third is not. Those who have intimated that the President of the United States is trying to drive that team overlook the simple fact that the President, as chief executive, is himself one of the three horses. It is the American people themselves who are in the driver's seat. It is the American people themselves who want the furrow plowed. It is the American people themselves who expect the third horse to pull in unison with the other two. I hope that you have reread the Constitution of the United States in these past few weeks. Like the Bible, it ought to be read again and again. It is an easy document to understand when you remember that it was called into being because the Articles of Confederation, under which the original 13 states tried to operate after the Revolution, showed the need of a national government with power enough to handle national problems. In its preamble, the Constitution states that it was intended to form a more perfect union and promote the general welfare. And the powers given to the Congress to carry out those purposes can best be described by saying that they were all the powers needed to meet each and every problem which then had a national character and which could not be met by merely local action. But the framers of the Constitution went further. Having in mind that in succeeding generations, many other problems then undreamed of would become national problems, they gave to the Congress the ample, broad powers to levy taxes and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That, my friends, is what I honestly believe to have been the clear and underlying purpose of the patriots who wrote a federal constitution to create a national government with national power, intended, as they said, to form a more perfect union for ourselves and our posterity. For nearly 20 years, there was no conflict between the Congress and the court. Then, in 1803, Congress passed a statute which the court said violated an express provision of the Constitution. The court claimed the power to declare it unconstitutional and did so declare it. But a little later, the court itself admitted that it was an extraordinary power to exercise, and through Mr. Justice Washington laid down this limitation upon it. He said, "It is but a decent respect due to the wisdom, the integrity, and the patriotism of the legislative body by which any law is passed to presume in favor of its validity until its violation of the Constitution is proved beyond all reasonable doubt." But since the rise of the modern movement for social and economic progress through legislation, the court has more and more often and more boldly asserted a power to veto laws passed by the Congress and by state legislatures in complete disregard of this original limitation which I have just read. In the last 4 years, the sound rule of giving statute